that. That'd be awesome. Okay. So I've been trying to alternate kind of doing these workshops twice a month, and one more focused on kind of an ed tech tool or idea, and then the other one's a focus on UDL in kind of more detail. And so we've been doing, I'm not sure, I think some of you have been to some of those other ones, but not everyone. So we've done kind of these first 3 focus on UDL ones have been a series of just looking at the UDL guidelines, which are in 3 columns. The first column being engagement, the middle column being representation. And then today we're going to look at that third column, which is all about action and expression, which is basically looking at the different ways we're allowing our students to show us what they've learned about something. And so I think, you know, I'm thinking of my own experience in the classroom, and I definitely, you know, had assessments I would give every year and go back and use them again. And there were certain, you know, times I was using a multiple choice test or an essay test and so UDL, which is all about choice, right? And multiple means of doing all kinds of things in the classroom, is really looking at how we can give students more choice and breaking down barriers for them in terms of showing what they know, because sometimes those methods that we're choosing create a barrier that's not really assessing the thing that we're wanting to know if they know how to do, because the assessment itself has built-in barriers. So just a quick example, if I'm giving a written test that's all multiple choice, but it's on, you know, the life cycle of a butterfly, does the fact that a student not know the vocabulary and have challenges with reading prevent them from showing me that they know the life cycle of a butterfly? And so really wanting to think, how can you break down the barriers and get at what the goal is of the thing you're really wanting to assess? And so that's what we'll be looking at today. Moving forward, I'm going to continue to kind of alternate, and there's the next UDL, focus on UDL, that I was thinking of doing is really on setting clear goals, because I think sometimes that's the tricky part, is that our goals get kind of muddy. And so it's really hard to make an assessment that assesses a goal when you're not actually 100% certain about what that goal is, and you're kind of mushing a whole bunch of things together. And so UDL really emphasizes being very clear on what your goals are, and so that you can tailor an assessment to really make sure that's what you're assessing. So, that will be the next one in a couple weeks, and I know, in November, I think, at some point. So I'm going to share my screen and we can dive in. And again, I think I was saying this earlier, but I would love to even do like usually we take some time to kind of share ideas with each other, especially with such a small group, because again, this is going to look very different depending on what you teach and the content and the age that you teach. So this should look familiar if you've been to a few of the other workshops. I'm using kind of the same format. Hopefully our takeaways today will be really looking more closely at that action and expression column of the guidelines and share some examples with each other. And then just, you know, walk away thinking more deeply and creatively about how we're allowing students to show what they know and what they've learned. So these are, again, we've looked at these guidelines. We're looking at this blue column here. The 3 kind of sections are all on physical action. We'll look at them in more detail: expression and communication, and then executive functions. And again, like Ellen, you're here representing like the youngest set of kids that we'd be talking about today. Ellen teaches first grade. And so again, executive function for a first grader is going to look a lot different than what you're expecting and wanting from, you know, a 12th grader that is managing college applications and all their work and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of that whole you know, wide range of ways that we can, even at first grade, start to train students to learn what tools help them, so that they can, as they grow, adapt those tools for the needs that they have as they're progressing. So Okay, let's see. So action and expression, this is the strategic network of the how of learning. So this one's really about, like last time we looked at representation, which is what you're learning. So what's the content that you're presenting to your students? And the time before that, it was why, which was the engagement. So really getting students to buy in and feel that there's meaning behind what you're doing. So now we're moving toward, like we've got them engaged, we've represented the material in a lot of different ways. And now we're really looking at how they're going to show us that they've learned what it is that they've engaged with. So the first one in physical action, it has two different kind of subpoints. Really, this is thinking about how students are interacting with their materials and tools. So I'll give you an example. I've been working one-on-one with Robin in her seventh grade science class over the last few weeks. And I immediately walked in and saw like kids knew where to get the materials that they needed, right? It wasn't a matter of having to ask for, things were clearly labeled, and there was a section of the room where different materials were, where kids could go, and they seemed to feel a lot of autonomy around moving around the room to get what they needed. So that, I think, is what we're talking about here in physical action. Of course, there's also like the idea of like stop and take a break so you can stretch and move if you've been sitting still too long. But I really think that that this physical action piece also has to just do with physical action around the room, students knowing what they need, knowing where those materials are, and being able to go get them if they need them. So thinking about what structures you have in place to allow for that, and again, I think we've talked about throughout these sessions, how UDL requires some letting go. So if you have pretty strict rules around when students can get up or how they can move about the room, that's going to require a little bit of like figuring out how can this work for you to do a little bit of letting go around that, right? So that students feel that sense of ownership to get what they need. And then also another one we've talked about a lot, and there's a lot of overlap in these guidelines, is really optimizing their access to assistive technology. So screen readers and dictation tools and things like that. So accessible materials so that if there is something around physical action that's difficult for a student, fine motor skills, reading, right? The physical act of reading, right? Those writing, like the fine motor of writing, that you're going to look for tools and assistive technologies that are going to help break down those barriers, the barriers around kind of the physical action of being a student, right? Of producing work, and of meeting whatever requirements are that they have in class. So that's kind of the gist of the physical action section. And similar to the other workshops that we've done, I just threw a whole bunch of ideas onto a slide of examples. And then I'd also love to hear kind of thoughts that you have and ways that you incorporate these things into your own classrooms at different levels. So again, brain breaks, I did a link to Go Noodle. I mean, I'm not sure seniors are really going to buy into getting up and doing a little dance in the middle of class, but definitely lower grades, and even through 5th grade, I've used Go Noodle with students at that level. Kim, have you ever used it in middle school at all? No. Yeah, it's a little tricky. It's a little cheesy probably for middle school and high school, but it's a great way for younger kids, I think, to stop. There's all kinds of silly dances and stuff and songs and ways. There's breathing and movement and yoga and things like that on there too. So depending on which ones you chose. And then access to fidgets, OT tools. I see those in so many classrooms. So I think we're really good at providing those, and our OT support kind of providing those types of tools for our students. I dropped in a handful of assistive technology supports. And again, we've covered this in a bunch of the workshops. So you could browse through kind of all 3 slideshows if you're really interested in assistive technology. But there's a lot available for voice typing, dictation. Google Chrome has a lot of these accessibility features built in that you can turn on in settings. And predictive text, we're actually coming to the high school to do a presentation about Snap and Read and Co-Writer. Co-Writer offers predictive text for students, and I'm still trying to figure out how we're offering that at the middle school. And then at 3rd through 5th, we're going to be presenting those this week at the staff meeting just for 3rd through 5th. And then I'm working with the middle school to figure out how kind of departmentally we can share those. But predictive text is really cool, especially for those students that hit writer's block or that, write a few words and then kind of run out of steam. Based on the subject that there's like, if they looked at a website, again, I keep using the butterfly cycle, but if they looked at a website about that, they can build libraries of vocabulary that kind of fit that topic. So it's topic-based predictive writing, which is really cool. You can turn it on or off, kind of like Snap and Read, and it will pop up a little list of what word you might be thinking of using next. And it can really break down that barrier for students that struggle with keeping their writing going. I don't know so much about automatic clicks and using alternative mice and stuff. That would definitely be something to reach out to Jessica Cortez about if you feel you have a student who's really struggling with kind of the physical action of using a Chromebook itself, or physical action of holding a pencil and writing. I mean, these are all things that I think OT and assistive technology specialists could really jump in and help us out with. If it's on a Chromebook, Jessica, and if it's not, then OT support for sure. And then using manipulatives, I found some really good, kind of cool, especially, there's physical ones that are real life, tangible things from home that you can use as manipulatives, and then also some very cool manipulatives that are digital. So you're welcome to click around in there. Jamboard is great for doing kind of dragging things around and showing things visually. I might do a workshop on Jamboard. I think I did one a couple years ago, but I would love to do another one and kind of refresh everyone's memory about Jamboard. It is a pretty cool tool to use. So that's physical action. I'm not sure if you have any other ideas for this, or if you have specific students in mind where you're thinking, or where you've tried things out to kind of help break down the barriers that they have around. It seems like the action of what is required, whether it's the writing or the reading or the movement or whatever it is, that's kind of their barrier. Does anyone have any other thoughts or ideas to throw in?
Yeah, so just for writing, in math, there's a lot of writing, and some students are resistant or they have fine motor issues, and sometimes giving them a whiteboard and a dry erase marker, it like writes more smoothly or something, or I don't know what it is, but somehow that seems to help some students a lot.
Oh, for sure. Interesting. Yeah, I wonder what that is, if it's the texture of kind of the feel, or if it's something psychological, like it doesn't feel as permanent, so you don't feel as like maybe like you're limiting yourself because you have to get it right, because something that's so easily erasable maybe feels more comfortable.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Anyone else thoughts around that, or thoughts around how you set up materials so that students can access what they need around your room, or anything like that?
Yeah, I do something similar to Robin. I call it a student station, so they can freely get up. There's tissue, there's sharpener, hole puncher, pencils, because I never want pencils to be a roadblock to learning. And then if I feel like they need any extra supplies for the day. And then I use bins on the table.
Mhm.
A lot of us, because science, do interactive notebook. So, and then it's their responsibility to replenish. And once they get in the groove of that, like the glue sticks out, the first week, glue sticks out, then they know like freely get up and where the glue sticks are kept and replenish it. So it just keeps everything running efficiently. And then, they have some ownership. So it's really nice.
Totally. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to balance that, like wanting, like students aren't always the most respectful with stuff or kind of go through stuff quickly or, so it is hard to find the balance and the systems that work. But I think you're right that independence, that feeling of like, I have what I need to do what I have to do is really, really important.
And maybe they don't really need that, whole
Yeah.
bunch. They need to get up. I just got fidgets. I had Maria buy me fidgets, and so far they've not been successful.
Yeah.
Um, I got a variety of 4, and they're just more of a disturbance,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So I'm really sad by that.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I think we've gone through waves of different fidgets that have become real fads in the classroom too. And so having to kind of manage the putty and the spinners and like that's become, they become like more of a toy than a tool. But yeah, it is, for some kids, I do know that like that it's really helpful to be able to hold on to something or to be, kind of having something that's a physical focus tool. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we'll go on to the next one and we can always circle back. The next one is around expression and communication. And to me, this is kind of like the meat, the heart of this column in the guidelines. This one's really about allowing for students to express their knowledge, their ideas, the concepts in a variety of ways. And again, this is going to look very different depending on your content. And, there's going to be times when you just have to give an assessment a certain way. But I do think it's really important to just kind of always keep in mind if you're using a very set traditional method where it's like, we have to do it this one way, being aware of the tools that you might be able to embed that can help break down any barriers that type of assessment might be causing for some students. So multiple means for communicating. So again, this could be as simple as voice dictation if they do have to do, essay as a part of their assessment, or there's writing as part of their assessment, allowing for that voice to text kind of situation so they can verbally say it and get it down on paper, that kind of a thing. So multiple means for communicating. Is recording a video an option? Is speaking orally to you an option, and you scribe, you're the scribe and you dictate it and they can express it orally. Again, is the writing the thing that you're assessing, or is it the content that they're expressing through writing? And so I think separating that, if you're assessing writing and you want to know, can you write an essay, and you've taught them the specific skills for essay writing, and that's the goal of your instruction, then of course you would assess them by having them write an essay. Again, there's tools you could build in to help with that as well. But if the goal is to, do they get the math content? Do they get the science content? Do they understand the history content? The writing isn't explicitly the thing that was the goal here. So are there options for opening up, the way that they can show what they know? So that is kind of the situation here. There's so much. I felt like there was so much I could have included. It's like kind of endless, right? And again, depending on who your audience is, your students are 3rd graders versus 12th graders, like this is all going to be very different. So I think, so I really just wanted to include some ideas around, in your context, how could maybe audio, if you've never allowed for that type of option before, or video. Flipgrid is a great example of, a tool that could be used where kids can record themselves. Screencastify, right? They could even screencastify themselves explaining something to you, talking you through it on their paper, drawing it and then explaining it to you, and using Screencastify or Flipgrid to do that. Allowing them to draw images or make posters, build 3D models. Again, I know I don't want to discount the fact that this adds a huge amount of work in terms of management and also in terms of grading. I know how much, I'm just picturing myself with like 5th grade math benchmark assessments, right? And I remember doing all page 1 and like flying through them, and then turning all the pages and doing all page 2 and flying through them. And like, there's so much ease in that, right? When you are grading, especially, middle and high school, when your number of contacts is so high that when you're talking about 150 kids or whatever, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have one kid who made a model, and what is the criteria for that versus this kid who drew a poster? And I really think that, again, is where, in future workshops, we could kind of talk through that kind of stuff together around setting those goals, really clear goals. And if you have a rubric that really isn't assessing the project itself, but the explanation of the content, then, a same rubric could be used for a video description as could be used for a written description. So that's kind of in my mind where that kind of comes in. Although that said, I completely understand, like, it feels pretty overwhelming, I think, sometimes, to think, oh my gosh, I could have, my kids doing 30 different versions of this thing, and that's very, very different. And I don't know that I'd do that for every single assignment. I think, again, you might have some assignments where you think, and Robin and I have been talking about this, like, as we've been working on some 7th grade science stuff, like, are there units where I'm really just not as confident that I am getting a good picture of what the students actually understand at the end of this particular lesson or this particular unit? And maybe that is the place where you focus on trying out an alternative form or some choices of assessment tools. And on, and on the other ones where you think, no, I think I think I have a pretty good, I get a pretty good understanding of what my students, there don't really seem to be very many barriers for students to show me what they know in these other subjects or in these other lessons. You could stick to the multiple choice or the whatever it is. So I don't think it has to be all the time, but it could be something interesting to think about. I thought this thing was pretty cool. There this is also teaching students to like, kind of how they think and what their routines are around thinking. And I haven't explored this too much, but I did when I was kind of researching this section. I found this cool project. It's from the Graduate School of Education at Harvard. And there are like these thinking categories, exploring ideas, digging deeper into ideas, perspective. I don't know. And you can pick your teaching subject: math, science, music, literature, reading, writing. And then you can kind of, click around and see some different ideas around this. I don't know. I'm not quite sure exactly how relevant it would be, but I wanted to throw it on there because someone I really value and respect in kind of the UDL world was referencing it. And so I didn't want to lose it. So I threw it on there for people to check out. And then just a lot of, these are templates for each of those thinking routines. And so, like, for example, if there's one on claim, evidence, and question, there are already Google Slide templates built around that that you can copy and paste. So if you read an article or listened to a podcast or read a video or watched a video, there's already some templates built around looking for claim, evidence, and question that you could just copy and use. So it's a whole Google folder through about that match all of those that match each one of these things. So kind of cool, like resource that's already out there. And then again, the options that you give for assessment, I think should be, like I keep saying this, but really focused on what that goal is. What was the goal of the lesson? I think that, I don't know, I think back and I don't think I was actually, I think pretty often I'm not sure I was very clear in my own teaching on what the goal was, of the lesson I was doing or the project, or, I don't know that I spent a whole lot of time thinking through some of the projects that I did and like, why are we doing it? What is it I want them to be getting out of this project? So, and then also just that there's this idea of not of finding a balance between providing options that eliminate barriers, but not being too overwhelming. So I don't know that I'd give 50 options for assessment. I think I'd think about, okay, I really want to make sure they can speak, they can write, they can do something more artistic. You could kind of hit 4 or 5 different options. And usually I think, you're going to hit your students and their needs if you are limiting it to a smaller number. You don't have to give them this choice board of 100 different ways that they can show you what they learned. So that is important there, I think. Anything that you guys think about that one? The alternate assessments that you've tried, or where you've kind of allowed students some choice, or a lesson where you think this might work well for you?
I've used templates to show things like California regions. So kids would have to get pictures and they would have to explain stuff. They'd make their own slide. I've also used something called, I think it's called ThingLink.
Mhm.
And what I would do is I would attach a picture and then they would have to get facts about it. So if it was like a mission, they would have to get different facts about the mission. And they seem to like it.
Yeah, ThingLink is really cool. It's almost like building like a bulletin board from a starting image, and the kids pin different things onto it. It's like kind of Padlet-ish if you've used Padlet, but it's more visual, I think, in a way. A lot of these tools, were free and now have paid subscription things. So you have to kind of poke around and see what can you still do if you don't want to be spending tons of money on like upgrading your subscriptions to some of these tools. Padlet and Screencastify, if any of you guys want. We do have district licenses, so drop me a note in the chat if you don't already have either one of those and you'd like one. I'm kind of managing who has those licenses. We have plenty of both for teachers, for Padlet and for Screencastify as of right now, which is really nice. Screencastify, I think, is great for this. If for kind of UDL, you can attach a little video of instructions to a project. You can give feedback to a student by recording it, and if you have a license, you won't be limited in how many you can create. I think you hit a limit of 10 or something like that, and you have to delete old videos if you don't have a license. And I also think you have a limit of how long. I think you max out at 5 minutes or something like that. So, and you could even have if you are managing it and you want a student to be able to record something, even if they don't have a license, they can do up to 10 and delete. That's probably easier for them once they've turned something in. Or you could have a station set up and you're logged in with your Screencastify and you could allow students to create, and then you wouldn't hit any sort of limit. So it's just a few ideas for that. Awesome. Thanks, Lisa, for that reminder. I haven't looked at ThingLink in a while. I'm curious now. I wonder how they've handled the rise in everything got so popular during the pandemic that all these tools that were free before, I think everything just skyrocketed and everyone's using them, and they had to grow so much. All these companies had to grow so much that, well, and they probably saw a huge opportunity to make money. So, anything else around that? The thought of maybe thinking beyond just one set type of assessment. Nothing else. We're
It's,
thinking of.
well, I was just gonna say, it's not, this isn't UDL, but last year for my seniors in pre-calc, if several of them were not doing well on tests at all, had a lot of test anxiety and needed a C in order to keep their admission to their Cal State. So for them, I would give the option of like a project that would average in with their test scores and allow them, to make a poster or, most of them I think were posters, but like more artistically showing how the math worked. So I'm thinking, yeah,
No,
how that could be instead of you also in addition have to do this, subbing it in as an option instead of taking the test.
yeah.
Hard to get my head around, but
Yeah, no, I know. And that's where it's like start small, maybe try it out on one little thing and just see, and build on that over time, and if it's a total flop, then you're like, well, that didn't work, and maybe something that's a little lower stakes, right? Where it's a concept that maybe isn't going to be then something that builds and builds and builds that I don't know. Yeah, but that's totally a great example of UDL, because another piece I think that was back in the engagement section was all around reducing stress around, and making students feel more comfortable, right? And so I think that plays in here as well when we're talking about assessments and test anxiety. And so for students that experience that, like, that can be a huge barrier, I think. And even if they know the content, I think just like being faced with that assessment is so stressful that they're sometimes not able to show what they know, like I'm remembering my own kid with the times tables, right? And like, if that timer was going, forget it. Like, but if we turn the timer off, like I remember having to do those mad minutes and I'd like pretend the timer for homework and I'd pretend the timer wasn't going, even though it was going. And I would just kind of be like, hey, let's stop around now, even though I knew the clock was like down to 3 minutes. Because that piece is so stressful. Some of that stuff is so stressful.
Jen, one other thing that I did when I was at St. Mary's was we had some concepts we had to cover and we had to act out a skit based on concepts and ideas as a group.
Super fun, super fun. And that's going to be totally like an avenue in for some students. And then for other students, that's going to be the barrier, right? Because for some students, they're going to freeze up and get stressed out if they're asked to like stand up in front of their peers and act something out and like, right. So, totally. It's so interesting. I mean, we've got that whole range of students, like the ones that are all want to ham it up and like be on stage and have attention. And then those other ones that are like, that would be the worst thing in the world to be asked to do. So, yeah, awesome. I love that idea as an option. All right, well, I'm going to keep going. This one's got 4 chunks, but this is really all around executive functioning. And again, this is, helping students know what the goal was, set goals for themselves. It's helping them manage information and all the resources that they have. This is really the piece of like helping students know how to be students, right? And like have those tools that help them organize themselves, allow them ways to check their progress. Do they know they're progressing? And so those types of things, and to really, like, the summary of this section was really taking advantage of their learning environment, right? And what tools could you put in place to help them do that? Again, that's going to look really different at different ages and in different subjects. But again, if you're building those tools, and not to keep making this about me, but I'm just thinking of my own kid as an example, who's a sophomore in college now. And I'm thinking even back to 7th grade or 5th grade, when they'd be overwhelmed by a list of to-dos. And if they didn't write it down, then it was a meltdown. Whereas as soon as there was just a checklist, it all felt manageable, right? And so even something as simple as kind of starting to get in the habit of doing that. And now they have this like Notion website where they have all their classes linked to their, and so they've learned as a learner how valuable that tool is for them to be monitoring their own progress, making checklists. Hi, Ellen. It's nice to see your face.
Sorry, I was in not a video kind of day.
No, I totally get it. And I know a lot of this, I know the focus has been on older kids, and I love to brainstorm with you on how you think
Yeah.
some of this like really applies to our youngest learners,
Yeah, that would be great. Just hearing everybody's ideas, I'm like, oh, I could take that, but tweak it. Like somebody said they had the student station and I was like, oh, I like that. Calling it that. And anyway, I keep coming up with some thoughts and ideas. So I would love to brainstorm.
Awesome. Yeah. And you have your own student, your own kids that are at this age too. So even for parenting, I mean, you know what I mean? Like parenting your own learners, right? So
Yes.
helpful.
I just was thinking, I'm thinking about so many different things. So
Awesome.
yeah, it's been great.
Okay. Awesome.
And I might turn my camera off again.
Yeah, that's fine. So for executive functions, I mean, there's so much out there again. And I think we talked about this even in another, in engagement. I think back in the engagement slideshow, we linked to a lot of different tools for staying organized and kind of getting, it's easier to be engaged when you feel like you have a handle on what's happening, right? And if you don't have a handle on what's happening, super easy to check out. So I think we've talked quite a bit about those types of things already, but Google Docs now has a checklist feature in it. Like, there's always been like bullet points, but now they have added a little checklist feature. So just like, let's see, if I go, I can just create a new doc. It's right here, and it looks like it's got little check marks in it. So it's next to the bulleted list. And then, so if you're making, just either you could do this and roll it out for students, or you could help them make their own. And then when you check something off, like I always put on things that, I know I can check off right away, right? So as soon as you wake up, you get to check it off, but it literally crosses it out for them, which is so satisfying, right? And so that's just built in now to Google Docs, which is really awesome, that checklist feature. That's, I would say within the last 6 months or so, I think that was added to Google Docs. So that is one. Sheets, I know the least about Sheets, but there are some, this links to a cool kind of tutorial on learning how to do all kinds of complicated Google Sheets and checklists. I don't know if you're a Sheets person. I put that link there for you. I'm definitely more of docs and slides and tables person, but that's there if you're interested in checking that out. Having rubrics and exemplars, like do an assignment yourself and have the students evaluate you, like you doing the assignment so that you can kind of go through that. I loved keeping old student work, and then using a rubric and having students grade old work. And kind of where would they put it on the, what would they give it a 1 through 4 if we were using a 1 through 4 type rubric. Asking them to reflect. Self-reflection is huge in UDL, having them really kind of bought into the whole progress monitoring and assessment piece. So self-reflection surveys, this link is just one example of, you know, and you can use emojis, you can copy this if you wanted to. This one is more just on what resources help you learn best, and it's kind of gathering information about how they're doing, how they're feeling, how they would rate their understanding of today's lesson. And Robin and I were talking about this too, of trying to have some sort of quick, not even a formal exit ticket, but some sort of way for them as they walk out the door at the end of the period to, whether it's a Post-it with a number on it or a color or something that gives you just a really quick assessment of how they felt they understood the content that day, I think can be really, really helpful. And then journals, portfolios, you know, all those kinds of things are great. That gets a little more intensive in terms of having kids keep track of their work in a portfolio type thing. And I think some teachers are already doing that in various ways with notebooks and things like that. But, and I'm happy to talk through that if anyone is interested. So anything else you, that comes up for you around this piece around organizing, self-assessing, kind of checking in on progress, breaking things down into chunks? I know a lot of us do that, especially if our students have a bigger project. Super important, because their brain is just not developed to the point where they can keep track of the big picture, right? They really need the those checkpoints in between. So anything there to Google Calendar's great, has all kinds of stuff. Google Keep is another kind of checklist type little tool that students might like. And those sync with your phone or your computer, you know, it's like kind of wherever you go, you can open Google Keep. I use Google Keep for, we have you could share a Google Keep list with a student, and then you and that student can both see it and could add things to a list or check things off of a list. Same with a doc, if you did a checklist on a doc, but like we have a family grocery list on a Google Keep note, and it's just shared with, you know, my kid and my husband, and so whoever realizes whatever you need will put it on the list, but then it syncs. So if you think of something for your student to do, or if they go home and they check off that next step, you can see it and see what they've checked off. So that could be a cool way to support their executive functioning. Anything else there? For those kids, I mean, for some kids, it's like the ones that just have a really hard time staying kind of organized and like on track. I mean, I'm sure you've tried many, many things over the years, right? For students that you need to kind of keep moving forward.
For the littles, a lot of pictures, like picture schedules, like
Yeah.
step by steps, really in simple.
Yeah.
Helps with executive functioning. Things just like unpacking your bag, or songs. We sing a lot of songs about packing up or unpacking.
Totally. Yeah. And even just having your schedule posted for the period or for the day, you know, even that is going to help with executive function when kids like know what to expect. I remember the few times I tried, it was kind of like, well, it was more for me than making my bed. I don't really make my bed before I leave for work, but I did always like pretty religiously get my schedule ready for the next day before I would leave work, so that it was ready the next day. But I do remember, you know, those few times when something weird would happen and the kids would walk in the room and the schedule is still up from yesterday for whatever crazy reason. It like threw them off completely, right? Like it was like, so it really does make a big difference. I think that predictability, knowing what to expect, is really important. And that piece around feeling comfortable and removing the stress element of what's coming. So yeah, the big kind of reflection question for this third column is, just kind of reflecting on the question, how do I allow all students to demonstrate their knowledge? What knowledge is it that you're really wanting to assess? And then how are you letting them show you that they know it? And then what resources are available for them to be able to do that? So that's kind of the biggie. This slideshow has all those shared links. I keep adding to the YouTube collection. There's great videos. And I've been adding to this collection to the previous UDL workshops that we've done this year so far. So I'm kind of posting them there as well as on the EdTech YouTube page. And then, yeah, I think, I have some ideas in mind of how to kind of keep this conversation going around like thinking about setting really clear goals is next. And then really maybe doing a few Mondays where it's more like workshop-y, where you bring a lesson and you could partner up, or we could kind of just keep the lines open and like look at the guidelines and think, what are some things you'd do to shift a lesson, based on the guidelines that we've looked at. And maybe a cool one too would be to bring an assessment and think through a little more specifically, how would you shift that assessment? What kinds of tools might you add to it to break down some barriers? So yeah, so that's what I got today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm always so thankful that people show up. So thank you for taking the time to be here. I'm going to stop recording.